Hey guys, this is Chris Bell. I want to welcome you again to Beyond the Weekend, the Three Circle Podcast. Hey, this is where we take what we taught on the weekend at all of our campuses, which is always straight from the Word of God, and we go a little deeper. We may pull some things out that we said on the weekend, but we want to go a little further with it because we only have so much time on a weekend, whether it's a Thursday or a Sunday. So those constraints are not here on this podcast. We get to go a little deeper. We always have a different guest on, and I'm really excited about our guest today. I've known him for a long, long time. He is absolutely one of the most talented people that I've ever known. He is a creative, but also just a great leader, and he's the creative director globally for Three Circle Church, which means he's got a lot of stuff underneath his leadership and under his direction. So I want to welcome to the podcast today my good friend, Jeremy Stevens.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to copy and paste that intro and listen to it every morning. It'll be my alarm clock.
Well, that is my goal, to make the guest when they get here go, wow, I didn't know that about myself.
That's right. Yeah.
But you are, Jeremy, you are the creative director here at Three Circle, which means so many things. And I've had the journey or the honor of watching your journey up close. I've had a front row seat to it for so long. And when I first met you, I actually nicknamed you Beanie because you were in my student ministry in Pensacola, Florida, where we were church planting. And you were this kid that would walk in, and it didn't matter if it was 100 degrees outside, you had that beanie on. Because
right.
beanies were cool
That's
then.
right. They were.
Right?
I'm glad I've outgrown that.
Well, but you did not outgrow the name because
right.
I still, and I'm sure it annoys you now as an adult, professional father, husband, every now and then I still let Beanie slip out.
Yeah, there's probably 10 people in the world that still call me that, and I'm okay with it, though. I'm okay with it.
Our good friend from Montgomery, Joel Goff,
That's right.
will still,
Joel.
he
Yep.
does not know your real name. He
That's
knows
right.
you as Beanie. But great to have you on the podcast today. So would you just tell us, before we start diving into the sermon, what does a creative director do? And of course, I know the myriad things that you do here, but what do you think the main deal is?
Man, so that's it. You know, people, when I talk to people too, they're like, what do you do at the church? I have to explain this all the time. And so it gets difficult. It
Yeah.
really does. 'Cause some people just don't quite understand kind of the big church and how much there is going on. But, you know, one of the main things that I love doing is doing sermon series, which is really a big collaboration between me, you, Pastor Zach. So, man, that's one of my favorite things to do, to brand those, to come up with some creative ways to make things look. You know, we're dealing with a lot of content that's old. So how can we make old stuff look cool thousands of years ago? How can we make it look new sometimes? How
Right.
can we take these character studies and pull something unique out? So, you know, sermon series is a big part of that. And obviously, you know, we have photo team and video team, which I don't specifically oversee, but Zach Allen underneath me, he's awesome, our video guy. And he runs with those kind of things. So I kind of monitor, keep an eye on those things, our app. You know, I keep an eye on everything we do, everything anybody makes, I keep an eye on just in case, right? Kind of quality control is what I tell people sometimes, quality control.
Yep.
That's a big piece of it. Yeah, there's just a lot. We do a lot.
We do a lot.
We do a lot. So there's
Yeah.
a lot to keep an eye on, a lot to check on. And honestly, I tell people too, a lot of the reason I work at Three Circle is because I believe I'm a critical thinker. And
No
so
doubt you are.
I believe that I'm pretty valuable in meetings, that I can listen and wait and think and
Yes.
come up with something. And so that's a big piece of it.
Oh, 100%. And I've seen the value of, you know, not only your creativity and what you can do there, but having you in a meeting. I've often said you're one of the people that I want in every meeting I can get you in because you help us make better decisions. And I think that kind of flows into our subject matter today because this week, you know, we're doing Fruit of the Spirit, which I think the backdrop, which is what I think you do creatively, is you help us create a backdrop to, you know, we always say the Bible, Jesus in the Bible's got the spotlight. They've got it. We're just pointing there. So we don't wrap the Bible around our creativity. We wrap our creativity around the Bible. The Bible's the boss, we say here all the time. And so that's happening this summer with the Fruit of the Spirit series. I just love the look. I love where we landed, but we worked really hard at it. It was months of going back and forth to get that feel so that people can kind of get into the context of a learning environment so they can really ingest it and take it in. But this week we're looking at that component of the fruit of the Spirit, patience. And we laughingly said Sunday, it's probably the hardest one you could say. Of course, they are all hard because we can't pull any of them off,
Right.
according to Jesus. But patience, for some reason, strikes a nerve. Why do you think that is for us humans? When we just hear the word, we almost start laughing. I know Sunday and Thursday, every time I made that just quick little joke about this is probably the easiest one, the crowd roared because we all know we struggle with patience.
Yeah, I told my wife I was doing this podcast and she laughed. I mean, that's just the
Right.
response that we get. Patience seems so difficult. I guess we're so irritable. As humans, we're so up and down with everything going on around us that patience, it's not natural most of the time.
It's not.
We're constantly fighting against the circumstance, the things we're going, one of the best examples, Chris, for most of us is come home after a long day.
Oh, yeah.
And then
And you're a dad.
Yep, dad to 3 kids.
How many kids? 3 kids.
3 kids, a wife. You walk inside and then it hits you. And you're like, I don't know if I have the patience for this. I'm going to try.
Yes.
And that's one of the biggest moments that I know patience hits me during the day all the time. It's like, and even yesterday, we're driving down the road with the kids to go eat on Sunday after church. And it's like a 10-minute drive. And it's the back seat is just
Going
chaotic.
crazy. Yeah,
it's
going
chaotic
crazy.
in the back seat. And you're like, and we were just talking about going on a road trip. I'm like, how can we drive 8 hours if we can't drive 10 minutes? It's not happening.
You are in that stage we remember so well where you just look in the rearview mirror and it's like a Royal Rumble from the wrestling world, happening. And we were there. You are there now. And so I do think we all have these pressure points, what we could call patience pressure points, and probably unique with all of us. I've always thought the creative process, which you guide and lead and navigate for us at Three Circle, requires a great level of patience. Would you talk to us for a moment? Because I'm sure listening today in our listening audience, there's a lot of creatives that do what you do, and to get art, to get creativity to a place where it really is excellent, it's a process, man. And you oversee that. So how do you find patience to be a valuable tool when it comes to creativity?
Creativity isn't always necessarily creating an art piece in like we would think a picture or a graphic or a video. It's so much more than that, right? And it can be a process, creating a process that can be one of the most creative things you have. Like we realized years ago how valuable Pastor Blake was when he came on our team because he
Process
created
expert.
so many processes that help make us better. And so
Yes.
the creativity is not just art like you would normally think. And so the starting point for creativity to me when I'm typically doing things for other people is always listening first. First, you have to listen
Well,
to.
see, now that requires patience.
Of course.
Big
Of
time.
course, yeah. And my personality is built to that somehow, so I know that's hard for other people, but I'm an Enneagram 5, so I'm going to sit, I'm going to observe, I'm an observer. So I'm going to take it all in, I'm going to listen, I'm going to see what's going on in the room or see what the project needs, see what the end goal is, see what we're trying to get. How do we get from point A to point B? That's the creative process, is
Okay.
A to B.
I love that.
Is that line from A to B is creativity, but you have to know where B is and you have to know where you're at.
Okay.
So listening, figuring out where you're at, where you're trying to go, whether it's a process, whether it could be a graphic, which is oftentimes what I'm trying to do. You give me point A and point B of we're doing this sermon series coming up. Jeremy, you got to get me there.
Yeah.
So that's where creativity starts, but I have to know here and there, and I have to listen and be aware of what's going on.
Okay. And so I've seen this happen before, which I think is an example of patience. So let's say we're doing this, let's say Fruit of the Spirit series a few months ago, because we stay on a 6-month roll. It's kind of how we, it's pretty embryonic in the beginning where we go, hey, 6 months from now, we're going to, like right now, we're talking about what we're going to do at Christmas. We're
Right.
starting to talk. And so we will often, I think there's the good, better, best.
Mhm.
And I think you live in that world a lot because we'll get an idea and we'll get some graphics going and we'll look at it and we'll go, wow, that's really good. And you could easily stop right there.
You could.
Right?
You could. And most people don't see that. So Chris, the next sermon series we're doing is basically in the bag. We're at the final finish
Yes,
line. Like
we
I can
are.
see the finish line. It's got 10% left. The next sermon series we're already working on, and I've got like 16 comps ish. You're not even going to see those.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to show you
Yeah, you
because you
filter
don't
'em.
need to.
Right.
Right? So we're already there, and it's so many options, and I got to filter through it. I got to say, these are not good. Get these out. Let's use these. Let's pretend, let's take these down the road and see where these lead. But also, we may do that for a couple weeks and say, let's try something new.
Yeah.
And that often is what happens, and sometimes that's where the best is found, right?
Yes.
Is being patient through the first. Sometimes you got to work some stuff out. You got to work some stuff out, get all the impurities out, and then all of a sudden, what rises to the surface is the best option.
So true. And sometimes that process is faster than others.
Sure.
Sometimes it comes fast and we're like, oh man, we're there. But other times, and I think Fruit of the Spirit was one of those, and Gideon, we did the Gideon series in the spring, and I remember in particular, we were right there, like we were about to go, yes, that will work. And I think what we had done is we had said, this is good, and then we got better. And we were almost there, but I think you and I think Zach Adamson as well, we just were going, it's not like, what is it? And so we went back to the drawing board one more time, and we ended up with what I would put on a wall in my office.
Right.
The Gideon look that we ended up, which it's basically looking at the back of Gideon, and in the distance you can see faintly this massive army.
Yeah.
And we nailed it.
Yeah, that was one of those ones where, you always hear that term, think outside the box. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but when I think of creativity, I think of using the resources you have in your box. Your box is all of your experiences, all the things you've used in your past, all your tools.
Yes.
Using those to the best of your ability. But then sometimes you do have to push beyond that. But it's more about expanding your box than just thinking outside your box. Now you're adding to it. Does that make sense? So
yeah, totally.
You're adding to now your experiences by breaking that border, making it larger. So now my box is bigger than it was a couple months ago after the Gideon project because we used new tools.
We did.
So
yes, and it got us there. And it made Fruit of the Spirit, because every time I look at that image, and I don't know, those of you who are in the listening audience, you can go online and see the image we're using, but that image was created, and all of the kind of juxtapositions that are happening there, the contrast, the things that almost don't make sense. There's this tree on a beach.
Right.
You don't really find those. Not fruit trees.
Nope.
Maybe a palm tree. But that's not what this is. And this thing is so loaded down with fruit that clearly it is dropping all over the ground.
Right.
And that was kind of what we were shooting for, is this idea that Jesus does something in us that's impossible. But it's so glaring when a Christian bears fruit. It's like seeing a fruit tree on a beach. It's like, that's not supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We're not supposed to be able to love like this, have joy like this. And it is so glaring to the world that probably initially it draws them to us, but what's really happening is they're being drawn to Jesus, who's producing the fruit in us, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I love that image that we ended up with, Fruit of the Spirit, because there's so many layers there that people probably overlook. They think, oh, that's just a nice... But there's so much there about the story. And to your point earlier about how we wrap things, we gospel centricity is where it comes from. That's one of our values.
Yes.
And again, that is always point A for us, right? That's always where we start. So we never create something just for fun, just cause it starts there. And I think that's what led us down that path and into where we did. So.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so let's talk about patience some more. This Sunday, we kind of got into the Greek and the Hebrew, which a lot of people don't know that one of your values as a creative director is you're also big-time Bible guy, big-time theology guy. In fact, you love to teach the Bible, and so you bring that to the table as well. It's not like it's a big leap for you to go, okay, I'm a creative guy, and let me bring the Bible in. Like you've got your own love for the word, your own love for theology and reading and bringing that in. So that's a natural kind of jump for you there. So as we looked at patience this weekend, what's some things that jumped out at you, as we looked at the Hebrew idea of long-nostriled, and then we looked at the Greek idea of long-souled. What do you think the Bible's getting at when it says one of the fruit components on your tree is going to be patience?
Yeah, I love that. And the Bible talks about, especially, I think it's probably Paul. if I can remember correctly, but he uses the idea of being level-headed a lot, which to me is an important piece of patience, right? You're not too high with your highs, you're not too lows with your lows. That keeps you grounded, and when you're grounded, I feel like patience comes more naturally. Like that's when you can. So the whole idea of taking the deep breath, kind of relaxing, not being so thrown off by the things going on around you,
Yeah.
maybe produces that in you. But Sunday, man, you said so many great things that I think you just flew over. Man, one of my favorite examples you used was the cookbook towards the beginning
Oh yeah.
when you talked about
The
living
recipe.
when you talked about living by the book, because spirit led is always one of those things that seems borderline, not ambiguous, but kind of.
Yeah. What does it mean, right?
It's hard to put into words, but man,
Mhm.
when you said the by the book, that means the authority of the
Right.
book. So now we live in authority to the spirit.
Yes.
So to me, that was a big helpful piece of patience is making sure that I'm mindful to surrender authority to the
Oh, I
spirit
love that.
daily.
Yeah, I
you
love
know?
that. That means we're not our own boss.
Right.
And sometimes it happens like that. It's interesting. So you prepare a sermon. Again, the creative process is kind of mingling with what we would call in preaching world exegesis and hermeneutics and using all these tools in the toolbox we have to try to bring the Bible to the people and our own lives as well. So what'll happen often is I'll have all that prep and then I'll get into the pulpit, if you will, and begin to preach and just in the moment something flies out of there, and that's one of those.
That was one of
Yeah, it was one of those where I just thought, and what's funny is I had just been around my son and his girlfriend had been making a cake, funny enough, the night before at our house. And they love to bake and stuff like that. And they were in there talking about the fact that they just kind of were winging that one,
Yeah.
just kind of putting stuff in there. And that's what I thought of there. Is I thought, because I wanted people to understand that is an authoritative phrase.
Absolutely.
I'm living by, and Paul even says, and if you're going to live by the Spirit, you got to keep in step with Him. That means we're not leading Him; He's leading us. And I do think that's a big deal for us as people. And to me, patience, that long nostril thing the Hebrews were grabbing onto, means I'm not in charge.
Mhm.
It's kind of like being on a trip. You and I have a mutual friend that's the best trip planner in the world, Jonathan. And
He is.
Yeah, and if you want to go on a trip, I feel like I have to. I've been my whole life. I've led every room I'm in. I go on a trip with Jonathan. I am not the leader.
Right.
And it's so relaxing.
Yep.
It sets me free, Jeremy, to
Yeah.
enjoy the trip.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think that's what the Bible's trying to tell us. Let go.
Yeah.
Let go. Trust God. And His authority actually is not something that impedes us, not something that constrains us, as much as sets us free.
Right. Well, and recently, and I know you guys have had a similar passport issue. There's a passport issue across our country right now, Chris, that is mind blowing. I don't
Huge.
know. Anyways, we got a passport for my oldest. She's 12. She's going to Costa Rica with me this week.
Yes.
Super excited
My
about that.
son barely made it across
Barely.
the finish line.
That's what I've heard. And
Yeah.
she did as well. We got it. We went and ordered it months ago. And so you talk about patience
Oh, man.
in a stressful situation when a flight's everything's planned
Mhm.
and you're
She's looking forward to it.
I know. It's her first real trip out anywhere, really,
Right.
And so big deal. We're like a week out. I've done everything I can do. I've called every senator, representative, done all the Googling and researching I could do.
Yes.
And then last Wednesday night, I think it was, I went home and I prayed in my driveway before I went in the house. And I
Okay.
said, because it was stressing me out.
Sure.
It was stressing me out as a dad, to have to tell my daughter, sorry, this isn't going to happen for you.
Yeah.
And so I prayed, I said, God, don't let this affect how I treat my family tonight. I'm very stressed right now, number one. And I said, number two, I've done everything in my power. I'm just going to relax. I'm just going to give it to you. I'm not going to worry about it from here on out. Whatever happens, happens, right? And then, I go all the next day. I'm helping my wife do a few things around the house. I'm like, and you know how it is. I was checking that government website every 15 minutes.
where is it?
Reload.
Was yours like en route? Is that what was
No,
going
it was
on?
in process forever.
Which
Yeah.
is even worse.
So last Thursday I took off. I was like, I'm not even gonna look, not gonna even check.
Okay.
And then around lunchtime, I did, and there was a tracking number.
Oh.
And I was like,
It means it's on the way.
oh, the biggest.
When did you get it?
It came in on Saturday, so it only took 2 days to ship. I paid for the extra shipping,
Of
had
course.
to, of course. But man, you talk about just that was a long nostril moment for me, where I breathed in and out Wednesday night and was like, I'm
Yes.
gonna have peace in this situation. I'm gonna just be patient. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I've done all I
Yes.
can do in my power, and oh man, what a relief! And that whole 3 months was patience building.
Yeah.
Just waiting and waiting, and so
Yeah, we went through the same thing with my oldest son, Gabe. He had a passport because he's traveled internationally with us, but his, we weren't paying attention, I guess, and his lapsed because I think minors are
right.
5 years and ours are 10 years. I
Mhm.
think is how that works. But my wife, who's on top of everything, man, she was on time. Like she went and actually one of our local offices kind of messed up the paperwork. That's
Mhm.
what happened. And they admitted it. They were great.
Right.
So even our local offices were working, trying to help. And by God's grace, man, we were able to get that thing and a couple other kids that are going on the trip. Literally, we're in New Orleans 2 days ago, and people got them in. They were not supposed to get appointments. So God really,
Oh, I know because I called many times to get an appointment. It was impossible.
they told us impossible.
Yeah.
But you know what? Someone made some calls and let them know the situation. And thankfully, real humans are in these offices.
Right.
And when they were like, you know what? We can do this.
Right.
And they made it happen. So okay, so that's one of those things we're all gonna face things that can make us impatient. And what we're saying is impatience is natural for us.
Absolutely.
That's what we call the works of the flesh. And I love how Paul, this brilliant communicator, so that we can better understand fruit of the Spirit, he gave us works of the flesh so that we got this contrast happening, which sounds artistic almost the way he did that. But impatience comes right out of us. I can be impatient so fast. So patience, fruit of the Spirit, is just so supernatural. We know we can't pull that off.
Right.
And so why do you think patience, maybe in particular, is so powerful in a world like ours that seems to be loaded with things that can try our patience?
Right. Well, and that even leads me to some question I had for you. So
Okay.
I'm going to try to answer this, but then get it back to you because I do think I was thinking about this the other day. I was sitting on my back porch, taking in the sermon and thinking through this whole weekend and patience in my own life and in the world we live in. I mean, it is so fast paced, and you don't really have time for patience. Most people would say there's always the next thing on the calendar.
Oh yeah.
I use Google Calendar for everything. There's always something coming. You can never quite be ahead of the game, it feels like. So maybe that's why. But my question to you was going to be, in the world we live in, is patience hard? I mean, when we read the Bible, there's things that sometimes we're like, oh, surely it's harder now than it was then, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of those ones for me that I wonder, just based on the pace of life, and not even just biblical times, but 100 years ago, is patience harder for us now than it maybe would have been then in a slower paced culture? In the now the text, I can call anyone across the country right now.
Yeah.
Back then, you're sending Pony Express, right? So
True.
is patience harder for us now, do you think, or no?
That's a great question. Okay, so I'm going to say this. I'm going to say different does not always mean harder.
True.
Okay? So because I think it would be easy to go, yeah, way different. It is or harder, but really I think what we're saying is different because one thing you have to realize in the when the Apostle Paul wrote Galatians, where we're kind of anchoring this summer, people starved to death all the time. Food was not, and just think about that. Think about the level of stress to be added to your life. If you could not grow it or somehow get your hands on it, you may starve. Your family may starve.
Wow.
There is no Publix. The Roman Empire wasn't real good about, people don't realize just how rough, like they were advanced, but also there was this barbaric underneath the surface thing. If you had a child and you didn't like your child, you didn't want him, just put him on the street. That was totally legal. That's how, indentured slavehood, stuff like that would happen, and even gladiator stuff. Like these kids would be put into these horrific situations. So that was Rome. And so again, you could be, if you weren't a Roman citizen, you could be crucified and tortured, and all this stuff could happen. That is a level of stress that we don't have.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you put all that in there, and I think that what you have is different. I would say maybe more complex now,
Mm-hmm.
which to me shows me the supernatural nature of Scripture. Okay. There's no reason a 2,000-year-old, and we're talking New Testament, Old Testament's older, but we're studying this summer a 2,000-year-old document, a letter to a church in Galatia. and that thing jumps off the pages into 2023 like it was written yesterday.
Right.
How does that happen? How can these words still be that like cutting edge? And I think it's because the God above time, around time, over time was able to give us those words. You see what I mean?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Amazing. And when you think about scripture and how it's held up over time too, there's a podcast I listen to that's about I love history. I love British history, European history. I love all that kind of stuff. Okay, so
Okay.
I got this podcast I'm in right
Okay.
now, and
I love history,
Oh, I know.
I did not know this. This is something new I'm
Oh.
finding out about you right now. I did not know you had this European and British
Oh yeah.
history love.
Well,
Okay.
and I love Greco-Roman history. But in college, that was what I was studying before I
Wow.
left to go to South Florida and get into ministry and all that kind of stuff. So
Very
I wanted
cool.
to go be a history teacher. That was my goal. So it's the underlying love I have. Okay, so there's this podcast I'm listening to about British history, and of course, a big part of that is Rome, because
Oh, yeah.
pre-Rome, there's not much history of the British Isles at all,
Right.
and even post-Rome, they enter the Dark Ages for 600 years ish.
That's right.
So even 1,000 years ago, there's not history about what happened in Britannia. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It doesn't exist. It was a Dark Age.
Yeah, because like Germany would have more history with
Right.
their,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's interesting that a book has held up that long.
Yeah.
And it's
And
so
not just,
powerful.
and it doesn't just hold up. It's not just like, oh, look at that sweet little old book. It's like you start reading the New Testament, and it's literally, you would have thought that Paul and Peter and John and James were watching our news, were watching Twitter every day, you
Yeah.
know? So I just go, there's only one way something like this could happen. It's
Absolutely.
super.
Yep.
So I would go back to your original question. I think it does those people a disservice to know that they had a massive amount of stress. I think ours is more complex. I think theirs was more severe, if I can pick that word, because many of us are dealing with the complexities of a modern life that's fast paced. They were dealing often with life and death. Is crazy old Nero going to come for us today? That's what those
Absolutely.
New Testament Christians were dealing with.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of impatience comes from the human-to-human interaction through communication, I think is where we get a lot of our
Yes.
impatience from.
Totally.
And probably the amount of streams of that we have now maybe contribute to that.
Totally.
When you think of all the social media apps, all the
Endless.
emails, text messages, phone, all the layers there.
And we hear everything that's
complicate.
going wrong all the
Right.
time. Like we get it in real time, and I just think, again, do I really need to know that a surfer got attacked by a great white shark in South Africa 5 minutes after it happened? Well, I do, because it happened this morning, And I don't know that us humans, maybe that's why impatience is such a big deal, because I don't know that we were created to carry that kind of weight all the time.
Right.
Like I've got to react emotionally to that. I don't know that guy, and I'm real sad that a shark bit a guy's leg in South Africa. But at the same time, was I meant to deal with that and I'm talking that'll happen 50 times today if I look at my social media, right?
Right. And it's almost desensitized us as people
I think
to
you're right.
you scroll through news like that, and it's just, I do it. I'm a Twitter guy. I like Twitter because that's where I get my news from. I don't watch the news. I don't have a newspaper. I get my news from Twitter
Sure.
personally. But man, I'll just scroll through stories like that like it's nothing, and it really is a heart-wrenching thing if you stop. And so
Yeah.
it's a good point.
So impatience is so natural for us, but this patience thing is huge where, we're able to navigate relationships.
Right.
How long have you and Steph been married now?
Oh, 12 years.
12 years. You know what? Marriage is awesome. You guys have a beautiful marriage, but it requires for both people patience, and then parenting, as you've already pointed out, and just work and life. But the big thing that we landed with Sunday, the Bible teaches us God supernaturally gives us the ability to stay in step with Him, according to Paul. So that means we wait on God. And we had that beautiful Isaiah verse where it says, if you'll learn to wait on me, you won't wear yourself out.
Right.
It renews your strength. And you'll mount it with wings as eagles and all that. So, which is such beautiful imagery, because we all know stronger the wind blows, higher the eagle flies.
Right.
How do you apply that to your life? That idea of understanding that God's not on our timetable, that microwave versus the crock pot thing. How have you applied that in your life?
Yeah, in my life, what I've learned, Chris, is that there are times you can make things happen for yourself, you know what I mean? But there's a lot of times where you just got to put your head down and take the step that's in front of you. And so to me, that is a sense of patience because sometimes we can get so weary about what is step 5, what's step 6,
Mhm.
what's up there. And I think that can give us anxiety that causes impatience in us, right? So worried about things and, oh, we just need to hurry and get there. But sometimes it's just put your head down, do the right thing in that moment and take that step.
Mm.
Get there, recalculate, take the deep breath, get some long nostrils, relax, take the next step. So, patience in my life especially in my adult life over the past 15 years or so, like there's times things happen you can't control, times you mess up, this and that. Patience is just taking that next step and then waiting
Mm.
and then waiting. And then is this where I'm supposed to be? Yes. Wait for the next thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can try to rush those, and when we rush, it's impatience, and we typically fall and mess
Right.
up and do all kind of crazy things.
Yeah, we do. We do. We all do. And I think that's what the Bible is trying to get us to understand, that if we wait on God, we make better decisions. That gives wisdom the opportunity to kind of settle in, right?
Right, and that was one I thought about that this morning. I wonder how much does wisdom play into patience and knowing when to say no to things, knowing when to say yes to things. One thing you told me when I was younger, of course, you were my youth pastor. I've known
Yeah.
you a long time. One thing you told me that stuck with me, and I'm probably going to mess it up so you
That's all
can
right.
fix it,
It's all
is
right.
the idea that we never make a huge life decision under pressure,
Yeah.
right? In that moment, when you feel the pressure, somehow find patience
Right.
because that pressure will relieve itself and then move forward. And that has stuck with me. And
Slow it
so,
down.
yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. And I told you that because I had messed that up so many times. Because the way I'm wired, whatever you want to call it, the energy factor, the entrepreneurial side, and all that, man, I roll fast. I will make a decision fast, and big ones, in
Yeah.
fact, if I'm not careful. And so that side of me, I think everything that God's placed in all of us has the good and bad side. And so over time, I've had to allow God to mature that side of me. And when normally, normally when I've regretted paths I've gone down or decisions I've made, it's been because I microwaved it instead of slow cooked it.
Right.
I wanted it right then. Let's do it now. And I've learned that, okay, I need to me, it's given breathing room to the situation so that wisdom can come in. And that's always been a huge one for me. So Jeremy, as we've done with all of our guests this summer that come on, I would love for the listening audience out there, they've seen your work. They realize they're like, oh, that's the guy behind all that we're seeing. You're you're putting together the backdrop to everything we do at Three Circle. But how do you walk with Jesus? Because Jesus told us in John, where he introduced the fruit idea, that we cannot do this without him.
Right.
We won't bear any fruit. Now, we can fake it for a moment. It will not become our life pattern without Jesus. So how do you abide in him when he said, you've got to stay close to me?
Yeah, absolutely.
What does a guy like you do to stay close to Jesus, to love, to stir your own affection for Jesus? How do you do that, Jeremy?
Yeah, well, and I think there's a lot of ways. And fortunately, I think this is something the church helps with. I don't know if people realize that, but the church helps with this in many ways through different things. And one of them would be small groups. I love my small group. Being with like-minded people who also study scripture, and you get together and you hash it out with different opinions about different things. So obviously that's one big way for me that I love. Dearly love the people in my small group. Respect them so much, and we challenge each other on things. Hold each other accountable, pray for each other, and then personally, just like I said, like the story I told earlier about the passport, man, prayer and telling God, being honest.
Yeah.
Being honest with God about what you're going through and how you're feeling, even though He knows. Got to tell Him.
Yeah.
So that's a big one for me. I always pray and say, God, thank you for X, Y, and Z. I always start that way. And then here's what I'm going through. Here's what I need. Right. And so prayer for me, even this morning, sitting on the back porch praying. I stepped on a big stick yesterday and my foot hurts. So
Like for real.
for real. So I'm gonna limp all day. But just being in prayer, even for little things,
Yes.
I think is so important. Teaching your kids is a great opportunity to abide and teach them abiding. And so, with a 2-year-old at the house, she wants to pray all the time right now. It's her
Oh yeah,
thing. So
yeah.
before bed, at dinner after you're praying, she wants to pray again. So I think prayer is important thing to teach. And then, just personally, just in reading. And then one thing I do with my kids, which I don't even think my wife knows this, but when school's in session,
Okay.
I'm the morning guy. So
Breakfast,
I
getting
get
them up,
up,
getting them going.
get them, drive them to school.
Me too.
Do you?
I kind of do
Yeah,
that too. Yeah, and I love it, by the way.
I love it too. So the Bible app on my phone is set to go off at like 7:05 every morning,
Okay.
which is typically when we're in the car. So
Perfect.
that gives us a good flag to read, to say a prayer before school, to talk, to do whatever we need to do. And so, parenting, I think, gives you a great opportunity, and is a great accountability partner. If you could
So glad you
put
saying
it that
that.
way, because it
Yes.
feels that way sometimes.
Right. Paul David Tripp
Mhm.
wrote Gospel Parenting, my favorite parenting book. And in there's a line that just poured concrete in my mind. He said, "Remember while you're parenting your kids that God is parenting you." And I have found that to be true.
Yeah.
Like one of the two greatest blessings on this earth God has given me. Well, I'd say three. Number one, being a husband has forced me, to my knees to want to get this right and to grow in my faith. So my wife has made me a better follower of Christ. My kids certainly have
Yep.
the gift of fatherhood because, they're not impressed. You know that. Are your
Oh, yeah.
kids super impressed with your creative abilities?
No.
No, when your dad,
Yeah.
and that is a gift, man. It is a gift from God. And then pastoring a church. To me, I tell people, if you want to learn the Bible, teach the Bible. Because Sundays, the weekend's looking at me in the eye every
Right.
week, and that has stirred my affection for God, and it just kind of land the plane on your abiding in Christ. You're a very smart guy. You're an intellectual guy, a thinker, truly. So I would think that you probably have a pretty solid and consistent interaction with God's Word. What does your Bible life look like?
Yeah, it depends. So right now I'm kind of just doing this. The Bible app has some great devotionals. So right now that's the thing that I'm going through. Man, I had a good one this morning. And then I'm also starting just to get into some basic theology books on the side.
Oh, great.
Okay, so I got this R.C. Sproul book
Yeah.
I'm going through right
One
now.
of my heroes.
So it's one of those ones that I've already told myself I'm gonna have to read 8 times to understand a couple of things he says. So
You're swimming in the deep side.
that's right. So that's one way, man. My favorite kind of story, because I don't think it. I'm trying to figure if it relates to me or not. I don't know, but one of my favorite people in the Bible, though, something that I go back to. So if it's like I don't have anything to read today, I'm gonna go back to this. I was back to Joshua.
Joshua. Okay.
And I don't know why, if it's like if to me I've always felt like I'm always runner up in things in life.
Okay.
And I almost feel like Joshua has a little bit of that kind of coming right in after.
I mean, how do you follow Moses?
That's what I'm saying. Like he's kind of got kind of a runner up kind of.
I've never thought about that.
And so I've always been that way. I've always
Okay.
been runner up in the spelling bee, runner up in the whatever, the funniest at school, whatever, all this. I'm always runner up. I don't know. It is what it is. So like I
relate
I relate
to Joshua.
I feel like I relate, like coming in after the big dog
Wow.
and you're kind of carrying the torch and trying to do what you can. And so if I have a go-to, it's definitely reading through that. And of course, being a history guy, like
Oh,
I love all that stuff anyways.
All
you know?
that history
So,
is amazing.
yeah, that's kind of where my go-to
That's
is.
awesome that you kind of found a character in the Bible. So
Yeah.
that's cool, man. What I love about you is that you've got all, and honestly, you could go do a million things with your skill set and what you've developed, but you choose to use it to the glory of God and the advancement of His kingdom through this little slice of the pie that we have here called Three Circles. So we're so grateful to you. But if you're listening today, what you're hearing is just normal people. Jeremy is doing what many of you do. I know many of you are creatives, but the one thing you're hearing is at the end of the day, we all go home and we're daddies and we're husbands and we want to get those big things right in our lives, and we have to walk with Jesus just like you do. Jesus did not say that if you're on a church staff, this doesn't apply to you. He said it for all of us. You will not bear any fruit apart from me. You can do nothing apart from me. So if you're listening today, that's the reminder. The reminder is whatever you do, whether it's creative or not, you need Jesus, and patience is a gift from God. If we can learn to walk with him, it will really set us free. If you had one more sentence to tell everyone right now in the middle of this hot summer we have, Jeremy, what would it be on abiding in Christ and finding patience?
Well, a little story you told at the end of your sermon
Okay.
stuck out to me when you talked about James and John.
Mm.
And the idea that you said this phrase, Jesus did not pour concrete on their past.
Yeah.
Instead, he spoke to their future. And for me, that was one of those moments that got me. And I wrote it down because if I could encourage anyone out there, it's, no matter what's happened in the past, it's done and dusted, right? Like Jesus knows what's coming. He, like you said, he knew what John was going to do one day.
Right.
And he spoke to that and lifted him up in that situation. And so if I can encourage you, man, it was just with that story right there.
Awesome. Jeremy, thank you for being on the podcast today. And hey, listen, we hope that your affection for Jesus has been stirred, and we hope that you've been encouraged somehow. Hey, check us out every single week. We're going to be here beyond the weekend on the Three Circle Podcast, and check us out Thursday nights. Our weekends begin on Thursday here on the Eastern Shore and at all of our campuses every single Sunday. Find a campus near you. And if there's not a Three Circle near you, find a Bible-teaching church, Jesus-loving church. Get there. All right? And we will see you next week right here, same place at the Three Circle Podcast.